Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, addicts of all ages, welcome to Canadian Sober, eh? I'm your host and resident alcoholic, Dougie Fresh. So glad you're with us. Today, this has been a long time in the coming. I've been wanting this girl to come on and share a bit of her story for a few years now, and it just hasn't kind of worked out. But today, I have a treat for everybody. Today, this woman she works in the mental health field. She's recovering. She's doing amazing in her life, and I'm really, really proud of her. And so I'm super blessed that she's here today to share a bit of her story with us all. Please give a warm Canadian Sober welcome to Kaleigh. How you doing, Kaleigh?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Can you please tell the listening people out there, the people around the world, a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Kaleigh. I'm 33 years old. I'm a mother. I also work in the mental health field, and I've been in recovery for about 4 years now. And I've been able to maintain my sobriety for 3 years, which has been incredible. And it all kind of started in my early 20s with my struggle. I think that's when a lot of us get introduced to substances, and that's when a lot of us are also struggling with real life issues and figuring out who we really are. And, mixed with mental health struggles that you might be going through with that is just a recipe for disaster for a lot of us, especially if you're not able to find that proper support that you need. So for me, I have a very nice family and I'm very blessed to have grown up with a loving mom and siblings, and my dad as well was in my life. But in my early 20s, my mom passed away. And this was really hard for me because that's when I became a new mother myself. And it all happened within a 3, 4 month period, and I was overwhelmed. I was unsupported as well. And I didn't really know where to reach out for help. And I feel like prior to that, partying was a normal thing for, our age group, 18 to 20. You're going to the bars, you're drinking, you're having fun, and then all of a sudden you're 23 and these very serious life things come up and you don't really know what to do. That's how I felt anyways. But because, I was a mom and I really loved my son, that was a big link for me getting the support that I needed and having a family that also wanted me to get that support. We do not all have the same resources available to us, and I consider myself unbelievably blessed that I was able to get that help. So, with the inspiration from my son, and wanting to be his mother and having a family that wanted me to be present, that gave me an opportunity to get some help. And when I went to get help, that's actually when I met Doug. He came to our center, and you know what? It was kind of funny when I met him because I thought he was like crying at one point during everything he was saying, and he was like, "It gets better, I promise you." And I was like, "Oh my God, like I believe him. Like he's just so emotional right now." And I really believe him because no one would just come here and put this much energy into that. So with that, I met other people like Doug, who really, really said it does get better if you put in the work and you listen and you put in the time. It really, really does get better. It doesn't mean life's going to be easy. It doesn't mean there's not going to be huge challenges, but you just get better at navigating through them without that self-harm piece. So I'm always very thankful that I met Doug, and he spoke so fondly of his partner that supported him, through his journey. And that was just incredible because you don't often meet people that can support you that well. So I thought this is great. There must be more out there for other people that, choose this path of treating themselves better. So with that, I made a commitment to myself, and not to say that it was perfect. I definitely made mistakes along the way, but those mistakes were like they're very important to getting me to where I am now. So I remember when I left treatment, I had no idea what to do, and I got a YMCA card. And I thought, well, nothing bad happens at the YMCA. So I remember just not knowing what to do some nights and being so depressed and lonely with my feelings. And when my son was home and he was with me, I was all in with him. We were doing whatever he wanted, playing hockey outside, watching whatever shows that he was into at the time, playing games. But then when I was away from him and he was with his dad, those times for me hit really, really hard. And that was when I started going to the Y. So I would go swimming, I would work out. I remember not liking it at all, but then I started to love it. And I had friends that started to join me. One of my best friends, Jeremy, he would come with me all the time. And so just little things like that. I started to walk my dog. I started to cook. I started to really start to connect with people again. And I hadn't done that in a long time. I hadn't felt, a lot of positive emotion in a long time. So it was a really beautiful thing. And I was lucky to have a strong support system around me. I have a best friend that lives all the way out west, and I would just call her sometimes and we would just stay on the phone for 3 hours. And we still do that to this day, but she was just down to just talk about whatever. And I just feel like all these little coping mechanisms just kind of came together. And with that, I was able to find my strength. And now I changed fields of work. I work for a mental health organization and I work at the front desk, and that's really, really helpful for me. Just being able to give back to people and being sympathetic and understanding when you see someone coming and struggling. We know that there's a stigma about addiction, and it feels good to be able to be that person to be like, you know what, you're in a safe place. I know what you've been through. Congratulations on coming here and getting help, reaching out, whether you're dealing with um, alcohol or just any type of self-harm, really. It's all really, really difficult. And these are really hard battles to face alone. So I get a lot of fulfillment out of being someone that can, kind of help someone get to the next step in their journey.
Well, thank you so much, Kaylee, for doing that. And thanks for being here today. I remember when you talked about when I shared that story at the treatment center. And I remember you coming up to me afterwards, and you were emotional yourself, and you were wondering if this thing was going to work for you,
Mhm.
and just like many other people, I've experienced it or I've crossed paths with, that have been able to, stay on the sober side. There's always that optimism that, is this going to work? Am I doing all of the do things that can keep me sober? And I think at the end of the day, the answer really is we don't know. Like I can't wake up one morning and say, um, today I'm going to go through life and everything's going to be fine and everything's going to be, sunshine and rainbows, because that's not reality, and for people in treatment and people newly sober, life can be challenging,
Oh,
and like
yes.
life can be difficult, right? So how would you say you deal with people when they come into treatment, or you start working with a new person? How would you say, you try to, what are the kind of things you do to try to change their mindset or try to get them out of the old habits that they were doing? What's that process like?
You know what? For me, it's very like just because I am just kind of the first person they see, I work admin. For me, my interactions are a little more brief. So I have a smaller window that I can kind of inspire someone or, but I feel like just being down to earth and sympathetic and empathetic, like just not judging people is a really, really helpful thing because you're never going to get anywhere with anyone if you feel like somebody's looking down on you. And I feel like we're all human at the end of the day, and we all struggle with things to different degrees. So I feel like just being kind makes a really big difference. if someone walks in those doors, they that's pretty brave, right? So to even get to that point, you got to give them everyone a chance and make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and being understanding.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you're the first person that people see
Yeah,
typically,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like they might have met maybe saw a counselor or something like that, like, that maybe kind of brought them in or something like that. But at the end of the day, you're the first person that they see. So if they walk in and they see you kind of just like, grumpy or sad or like, like something like that, that might change their outlook on maybe the decision that they've made.
absolutely.
So you're a key role. Um, Tell me a little bit about your family, your husband. You just had a child like not too long ago. Tell me about that family atmosphere. How much has that changed your outlook on your situation right now?
Well, you know what? Actually, this one I wanted to touch base on because my son is actually 9 now, but I am yeah, I know. When I was in treatment, I guess it was 4 years ago, so he was a lot younger. But he's from a previous relationship, but I did start dating someone during my sobriety, and that's something I didn't think would happen because I didn't think people existed that just didn't drink. I thought everybody drinks, like I'm not gonna be able to meet anybody. But I got really, really lucky and I met someone who just happens that drinking's just not a part of his lifestyle. He's a hard worker, he's a calm person, and now me and him are actually expecting a child together in April. So it was almost like you're like psychic there because you're like you just had a child not too long ago, but no, we're having one in April.
Nice.
So yeah, and that's actually something I never thought would happen for me, because I didn't know anything would happen for me when I was deep in the struggle. So I get to be a mom again, and that's incredible. Now I'll have two little boys instead of just one, which is, really lucky. My son's very excited, and it's a lot of things that I didn't think would happen for me. And, just getting like sober on it was enough for me, but getting to actually get to that point where I met someone else who makes me really happy and we have a good life together, and now to adding to our families, very, very blessed.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank
Maybe I
you.
was a bit psychic there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's so important, I think, in sobriety. It's so important in my sobriety anyways, is that, I'm with somebody um that doesn't drink, themselves, or like they didn't really like care. They didn't care for it. My wife and I were having this conversation the other night on a walk we were going on, and we know other couples, other people that they're the other half, they still drink, and I said, I don't know if I'd be able to do that, like if you brought home, like, say, a bottle of vodka, or a beer or something like that. I don't know if I'd be able to be around it. I don't know if I'd be able to trust myself around it, so kudos to your new man, that it's not really a thing for him, and I'm starting to notice that in a younger generation. I have three nieces where drinking is not really a priority, and for me, drinking when I was younger was a priority. I had to have it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
so would you say you notice a shift maybe in the younger generation, like where you are, of like people that just could take it or leave it, like it's not a big deal?
I noticed a shift in like people being more cautious of their wellness, and I think with that comes like leaving out the alcohol. And then I think with all the sober people like preaching how much better it is, like really being outspoken about it. Like for example, my dad, who's obviously not in the younger group, but he practices sobriety like quite a few months of the year, and this was something that he never used to do, and he will tell me about the benefits. He'll be like, "Kaleigh, like I'm sleeping so much better, like I'm calm," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is like every day for me. Like this is." it is good. And I find even in my family, like you kind of, it's almost like you outgrow it, if that makes sense. It's not as
Yeah,
fun as it used to be.
yeah, yeah. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine that, um, I think maybe the older we get, it's not just our bodies can't handle it, the amount of stuff we were doing to it before, but it doesn't, it's not important. There's other things in our lives that are more important than drinking. And I think, um, when you're young and you're kind of experiencing everything and it's new and it's fresh and but then we get trapped in this false reality of I need this to survive, and the truth is that you don't. And but our brains tell us we do. And sometimes we need to seek outside help. Sometimes we have to hit that proverbial rock bottom, that some of us have to hit, in order to kind of wake ourselves up. What would you say your rock bottom kind of was?
Um, my rock bottom would have been when I would really only want to drink when my son was gone. And during those periods, my rock bottom came when drinking became a little bit more often than that. And that's when I got help pretty much immediately. It was also during the COVID period, because I don't know that like isolation, I liked it and it wasn't good for me, if that makes sense, right? Because it just gave me so much time to drink and be alone and hide from people. And I think it was just a horrible time for a lot of people that were struggling, and a lot of people in general. But that was kind of when my rock bottom was very obvious and when I was able to accept that help.
Yeah. Do you have like you probably have a support cast like other than say like your boyfriend and your kid. Who would you say is your biggest supporter besides your kid and your boyfriend?
Definitely is gonna be my best friend, Jeremy. He literally just did everything with me, especially when I left treatment. And, I didn't have a partner then, and when my son wasn't home, I was alone, and he was the one that would come to the YMCA with me, um, walk my dog with me. We would go feed birds together, like just things that we would have never ever done. And I was really lucky to have him fill in those gaps. But I have a really good group of friends, and I would have one of my best friends would just text me out of nowhere often, Adesha, and she would say, "I'm so proud of you. You're doing so great." And it just felt good for someone to give me that feedback. I'll also give my dad some credit as well, because I lived with him when I left. And he was there for me through some really hard times. I can't imagine it being easy as a father, and especially with me not having my mom. And there's no manual, there's no right way to do things. But he tried his best, and I'd say he did a really good job. He kept alcohol out of his house, or nowhere that I ever saw it, anyways, while I lived with him. He educated himself, and even now, like whenever I do like mental health events or anything like that, he's always the first one to show up, and participate in them. I did a walk to defeat depression. My dad joined my team right away without question. So, sorry, I have my sister's cat here.
It's okay.
He wants to be a part of it, I guess. But yeah, I would say that. And then I had a dog too who passed away. I know he's so cute. And he was a big force for me. I wanted him to see me sober, before he passed away. And I know that you are also a huge dog lover, and you had a beautiful chocolate lab. Um, so yeah, it was that I really wanted my dog to see me sober and well, because he saw me through so many horrible obstacles.
Mm.
And that was also a big support for me, because he was always there for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important, I think, in any person's lives going through addiction. It's important for us to have that support crew. One thing I was thinking about as you were sharing with us was, the holidays are approaching.
Yeah.
What would be some tips that Kaylee would give, say, newly sober people or newly like people in recovery that, things to do and things not to do?
Um, my tips they're probably this might sound ridiculous, but one of my tips is always park at the end. Don't ever get your vehicle blocked in. Park on the road if you need to, just because if you want to leave, you can just leave. You don't need to explain to people. Drunk people don't have a concept of time, so if you want to leave and you're feeling uncomfortable, don't feel guilty. Just get out of there. Anyone that's, drinking and has the luxury to just have fun with it, they don't truly understand what you're going through. So just always putting your sobriety first, really, never feeling like you have to stay somewhere if you're triggered, and being okay with leaving. Um, for me, like obviously my family wanted me sober more than anything, so whatever I needed to do, but that's one that really worked for me. If you feel uncomfortable telling people about your sobriety and you don't really even want to explain yourself, like I know it sounds funny, but you can just tell people, I'm on antibiotics, I can't drink, you know, whatever excuse that you want to use, just go ahead and use it. That's one I feel like this is one of those times. But really like the most important thing is actually being able to surround yourself with people that do support your sobriety. I know we don't all have that though. We don't all have family and friends that want that for us. So if you are, in those positions, just make sure you have an escape plan if you need to leave a dinner early or whatever it is.
You brought that up, and I've never thought about that before, ever. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before. Park further away so you don't get blocked in.
I
Like,
know. I'm an
like,
introvert as well, so
but I think that's amazing because there are a lot of events where you go to and everybody wants to be closest to the door, but like when the event's finished, or if you try to leave, there could be obstacles in your way that prevent you from getting out. So like, that's a really good tip. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to use that. You know what would you say maybe one of the biggest misconceptions are, that when people want to get sober, or when they try to get sober, that it's they have this thing in their head that this is what it's going to be like, and it's totally the opposite? What would you say one of those things are?
maybe that it's going to be easy right off the bat and you're going to get it, and if you're committed, you will be perfect. I don't think it is easy right off the bat. I think it's actually really hard right off the bat, and then within time it gets a lot easier. So if you're having a hard time when you're newly sober, you're good. You got to keep going. You got to keep doing the sober thing because it's hard. So you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing something right that by staying sober. But I think like for me anyways, I thought you go to treatment, you come out, you're good as gold. You don't need to worry about anything. But that's when the real work starts. It's when you're adjusting to regular life and you're figuring out, what am I going to do when I have a really bad day and I can't, reach for a drink. You got to have a plan. And so I think just being easier on the actual struggle and not being like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm having such a hard time. No, just, relax, take a breath. It is difficult and you're going to be okay. I think just that for me is a really important piece.
Did you ever have to cut anybody off? Was there anybody in your life that you would say was like, you don't have to mention them who they are, but was there anybody that you would say was like a bad influence, or somebody that you just had to kind of stay away from when you started to get sober?
You know what? This was not a thing for me, and I know it was a thing for a lot of people I know. But I happened to just have friends that really wanted me to be sober. And a couple of my best friends never drank anyways. So it wasn't a challenge, but I was lucky and I actually didn't have that. I have like a few acquaintances that I know I'll never hang out with again. But with that, they weren't a part of my inner circle, so it was pretty easy.
Mm. If people don't know that they were watching and they didn't see the part with the cat, they'd probably maybe think you had a ghost in your house because the curtains behind you were moving.
Oh, that's funny. He's very curious. My sister's on a trip right now, so I came here because we have a puppy at home, and she is just a lot. And I thought, okay, it'll be a little quieter here, but Milton's proving me wrong.
That's awesome. So we got a couple minutes left. Share with me maybe something that when you got sober that became a staple in your sobriety. And that could be a food, like an item like food menu or something, or like a drink, or something you said, you know what, I need to do this, on a daily basis. Exercise, um, walking, like spending time watching a movie. What was something in your life that became really important?
For me, it was just like having a nighttime routine, which was something like I never had before. And basically just having that time where you take care of yourself. And then for me, I really like to read before bed, so I'm always looking forward to that piece. So I'm going to read and maybe have a little snack before bed, which is not always the best thing, but I'm happy with it. It doesn't harm me too much. So that's something that I really look forward to, is just getting some reading done, relaxing, and just hanging out with my dogs.
Nice. Okay, favorite Christmas movie?
Probably Home Alone.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. How about you?
mine was oh man, I can't even remember the name of it now. The Christmas Story.
Oh, I've
Um,
never seen
you'll
it.
you'll shoot your eyes out. The guy wants a BB gun and he doesn't think he gets it, and then he gets it, and then it happens to him. He doesn't shoot his eye out, but he injures himself. You know, um, Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. I'm super proud of you. You've grown so much since that first time that I met you, and I just want to wish you much more success in the future. And thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me and being patient and waiting for me. And it was great to be here.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today on Canadian Sober. I'm Doug. That was Kaleigh. Peace and love wherever you are. We'll see you next week on the show. See you guys later.